Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pack and Clint show here on Total Coverage Sports. Really appreciate you guys joining us again for another Tuesday episode. We're super excited for you guys to be here. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet. Go follow Ghost on Twitter. Go follow Total Coverage on YouTube and on Twitter. And we've got a really good show for you guys today. We're going to break down some of the games from this past weekend. We're going to be talking about some of the games that are coming up here on this upcoming Saturday. And then we're also going to talk about the college football rankings as they get announced and as they get released here tonight. We got a super fun show for you guys. Going to talk a lot of football, going to break down a lot of different games. So stay tuned in for that. And Clint, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Got an amazing win this weekend against top 10 team. Texas looked very dominant for a good amount, and just happy to come out with the win and just excited to see where we're ranked today. And then also, little side note, Texas basketball starts today playing Duke, so just a really fun day and fun weekend.
Yeah, all the more reason to be here on Total Coverage. We've got a couple of different basketball accounts on here, a couple of different basketball podcasts that will go up. We'll talk about everything that you need to know in terms of college basketball across the country. So you want to stay tuned in for that. We can start immediately. We're going to be talking about Texas Vanderbilt first. We're pretty much just going to be talking about the games that happened this past Saturday in sequential order. So that starts with Texas Vanderbilt. I'll let you take the floor first, Clint. I know that you watched the Texas offense, and let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, so the Texas offense looks probably the best it did all year from a full game perspective. You take away that second half of the fourth quarter where we were playing a little bit more conservative to really drain the clock to just get the game over with. They were moving pretty damn effectively. Arch looked great, probably his best showing at Texas, taking into account the opponent and how he played. 25 for 33 with 328 yards. Very, very efficient performance. First play of the game, 75-yard touchdown to Ryan Wingo on the screen. And then from there, the offense was rolling for pretty much the entire game. Scored on, I think, every drive of the first 6 drives, and we only ended up punting once. So it was a very good offensive performance. Defense-wise, looked good to start. It was a little bit of somewhat bend don't break, except for that first drive where we got the fumble recovery. You saw them kind of creep into our territory a bit, but we were able to just get stops. And then those floodgates started to really open once we got late into the fourth. Obviously, would have loved to go without that collapse at the end. Thankfully, the ball went out of bounds and they didn't get another possession with 30 seconds left. But other than that, very good performance and just happy to get a win over a top 10 team. Very big win. We needed that. We lose that game, we're probably out of playoff contention. So just happy to survive another week and just really happy with the performance that we had Saturday.
Yeah, I have to agree. I thought the Texas offense looked really good on Saturday. I thought that just in general, from a game plan perspective, I thought it was probably the best game plan for Arch Manning that we've seen this year. There was a lot more of him getting the ball out quicker. We obviously saw that through the screen game, which was super effective. But in terms of just the pure concepts, I thought you saw a lot more 3-step drop and the ball is out. You saw a couple of deep outs there that Texas was able to hit, and that's obviously a throw that Arch Manning is very comfortable with. If you go back and you watch him throughout the season, that's a throw that he's consistently accurate at throwing, even going back to last year. So I think early they did a good job of not only giving Manning some really easy completions, but going back to concepts that he feels super comfortable with. I thought that was super effective from Texas. And then I thought it starts with the offensive line. I thought they were really good in pass pro. That was a very good Vanderbilt pass rush. They were something like top 10 in terms of pressure rate when they were only sending 4. And so for Texas's offensive line to be able to not only handle that pass rush, but really keep Manning clean, I think is a really good sign for Texas. And when he has time, I think he showed you what he can do. He saw the field really well on tape. I think you can see about 3 or 4 times where he's getting deep into progressions, whether that's the third or fourth read. And that's not something you saw early in the season. And some of that is just a byproduct of not having enough time to actually go through your progression. So I was super encouraged with the pass game and the pass protection from the offensive line. The run game is still going to be a work in progress. And to me, that's just contingent upon can CJ Baxter get healthy? How healthy can he be? Because I think it's a lot to ask Trey Wisner to be your only back that has any level of consistency. So being able to get CJ Baxter anywhere from 10 to 15 carries per game, in addition to getting Trey Wisner 15 carries per game, I think that's something that Texas needs to be able to do going forward. We didn't get to see that on Saturday, and that's kind of my only qualm or my only thing that um, looking into for Texas going forward offensively.
Yeah, you said everything perfectly. Uh, only other notes I have to add, I really enjoyed watching the combination of not Connor Stroh, Hayden Cole Hudson at left guard and Connor Robertson at center. It looked like they really meshed well together. It looked like the whole offensive line really did a lot better. They were a lot more coherent. They were a lot more smooth. They were not making a lot of busts and assignments, and it was just an overall good game from not just a pass pro but also a run blocking perspective. And then to your point about putting the load on Wisner, I could even see towards the end of the game that he was really, I wouldn't say hurt, but he was kind of limping a little bit, just getting up a little bit gingerly. So you need to really be able to take that load off him, but it was just a good performance overall.
Yeah, so I don't think you can say the same thing about the Texas defense. Wasn't a great performance. You already touched on it. I'll just go a little bit more in depth here. So, for one, it doesn't help when you lose Michael Taff and Jelani McDonald. Not having your two starting safeties obviously isn't ideal. You could kind of see that with how many busted assignments were in the secondary. I think the other thing that I've kind of talked about for a while now, and Clint, you know this, is I think part of my issue with Pete Wilkowski defenses is just you do give up a lot of free access throws when you play off by 8 yards and you're playing cover three. Where the way that a lot of teams get away with playing cover three a lot is they start from press. And because they start from press, they can play with a shuffle technique, which is exactly how it sounds like. You're just shuffling your feet as you read the receiver's release. And what it does is it allows you to break down on throws a little bit faster. Where if you're playing 8 yards ahead of the receiver and you're backpedaling, you don't have a chance on an 8 yard hitch because you're going to be at 15 yards and you're going to have to either bicycle step or T step. You guys can look that up. It's fairly self explanatory once you see it. But you're going to have to take a step in order to transfer your weight from your back leg to your front leg and then go drive on the ball. You don't have an ability to take away free access throws. And I think you see this a lot against Texas. You saw this a lot in the playoff last year, where Ohio State and Clemson in particular were very content to just take 8 yard hitches and move the ball. And so Vanderbilt did a decent amount of that in this game. It didn't help that there wasn't great tackling at times from Texas. But that's kind of something that for me defensively, I've looked at and I'm a little curious to see what the adjustment is for Texas. Is there something that they think they can do in order to stop giving away so many free access throws? Because I think teams like Georgia, teams like a Alabama, teams like Ohio State, and whoever it may be that Texas will play down the road, they're going to be more willing to take those free access throws and they're going to be willing to go on 12 play drives. And if you're banking on consistently creating havoc against those teams, I'm not sure that that's exactly a recipe for success defensively. So I think there is some change ups that are going to be needed to be made by Texas defensively. And then in a little bit after I let Clint go, I'll talk a little bit about some of the busts that happened and why they happened.
Yeah, man, I don't have too much to add to that. You covered everything perfectly defensively.
Yeah, so then I can now go into what happened on a couple of these busts. Obviously, the one that is most prevalent or that comes to mind immediately is that something like 60-yard touchdown in the to make it. I think it was 34-24. I want to say. Um, so what happened was they were playing. Texas was in Tampa too, and so the way Tampa 2 works is there's 4 underneath defenders. There's a flat defender, and that's basically just the numbers to the sideline. There's a deep half player who's covering pretty much one half of the field, just very deep. So think 25 yards and beyond. And then there's a player who splits both of the half field safeties. That's what's called a pole runner. And what Vanderbilt did was they ran a deep over with their number 2 receiver to the boundary. And so Xavier Filsamy, who is the middle run through or the pole runner player, he looks to the strong side, which was actually the field. And so what ends up happening is because the field side number 2 slot receiver doesn't run a deep route, he then looks to the quarterback. And this is part of the way that Tampa 2 eye progressions are taught, whereas as a middle third or as a Tampa 2 pole runner, you start with both of the number 2 receivers because they're the most immediate threat to run through the middle of the field. And so Filsamy starts with the strong side because that's what a lot of teams teach. And because he doesn't get any threat from the strong side, he ends up looking to the quarterback. That's something that Texas teaches. They don't teach a full scan where you go field side or strong side number 2 slot receiver to the weak side slot receiver. And so what ends up happening is Filsamy's not there to take the deep over that occurs from the boundary. And so Derek Williams then has to take the deep over. And Jalen Gilbo doesn't squat under the go route. Jalen Gilbo stops once he carries him through the flat, and it means that the go route is wide open. Now, if you contrast that to the other side of the field, you'll see that Cade Phillips keeps squatting on the go route that happens into the field, where he's still staying on it, and that gets you what's known as a cloud double. And because of that, it eliminates a throw. Because Gilbo doesn't squat under the go route, it means that go route is wide open because you don't have a half field safety who can take the go route because he's covering the deep over. And so busts like that are things that just can't happen, right? That's a starter for you who's been there something like 4 years. That's not something that should happen. So those are the types of things that are a little concerning where you're not super happy with the performance from Texas. You're not super happy with how their corners played, how their secondary played. And you just hope that with Michael Taff and Jelani McDonald being healthy, that'll kind of alleviate some of the concerns that you have.
Yeah, I want to touch on a comment that we have right here. The rankings have come out, and Texas is spotted at the 11th spot. Other SEC teams that we've gotten so far, they're just covering the top 10. Number 25, we've got Tennessee. And number 22, we've got Missouri, 16, Vanderbilt, and 12, Oklahoma. So as we see from the committee right now, they're really weighing in head-to-head matchups as we're just ahead of Oklahoma. So great spot to be at to start. Pretty much around where I expected. I think you expected to.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about it before the show that we thought Texas was going to be anywhere from 10 to 12. It was almost an obvious thing that they were going to be ahead of Oklahoma. When you look really into the resumes, they're basically the same. You could argue that Texas has a better resume. They have better ranked wins. They've got a higher strength of record, a higher strength of schedule. If you go look at Kelly Ford and you go look at some of those metrics, Texas is ahead in terms of their deserving scale. So I don't think anyone's surprised by Texas being 11. Now, I assume that Texas is not going to be in the playoff if it started today, and that's just because you do have the ACC champion and you have the Group of Five champion that will have to jump Texas. So it tells you that there is a lot of room left for Texas. They do have some work to do, but they've also got two top five matchups, two top five teams that they're going to play. So there's a lot of opportunity.
No, you touched on all that perfectly. I think right now we are ready to dive into our next game that happened this past weekend with Georgia versus Florida in Jacksonville. I will let you take this one to start since I know you are a big fan of the two defensive coordinators in that game.
Yeah, so It was kind of everything that I thought it was going to be. I know that last week I said I thought this was going to be a low scoring game. I didn't think either offense was gonna light it up. I took Georgia to win in a pretty low scoring close game, and I think that pretty much came exactly to fruition. Where Georgia just late with their depth was able to lean on Florida. Chauncey Bowens, I think a 33-yard touchdown late in the game ended it. Lagway had a incompletion on third down and 4. That really is inexcusable because he could have set his feet, made a good throw, and it's a walk-in touchdown. But it did kind of come out the way I thought it would. In terms of my takeaways, I don't really take a ton away from Florida. I think they are kind of what they are. They're a really, really good defense. They're a top 3 defense in the SEC, but they're an offense that struggles to execute. They're a pass game that has a lot of flaws and a lot of things that concern you. And for Georgia, I kind of had this feeling heading in. I thought the offense was a little overrated. I talked about how against top 50 defenses, they had really struggled. They'd averaged heading into the Florida game only 21 points. They'd averaged under 350 yards, less than 200 passing yards per game in those contests, and another 24-point performance. It's not exactly a statement win from Georgia. The offense once again struggled against a good defense. The run game outside of that Chauncey Bowens run late was very mediocre. I think to me that kind of signifies what this Georgia offense is. I think they're good. They have their moments, but I don't think that this is an elite offense. I don't think an offense that can win you a national title. And so it is. I'm kind of at the same place I was with Georgia heading into the game, and that's I think they're a playoff contender. I wouldn't put them as a title contender, and I think if they play one of these elite teams, say a Ohio State, an Indiana, an Oregon, if they play Alabama again, I would pick those teams against them because I think this offense is gettable.
Yeah, you touched on everything good right there. I got pretty much the same takeaways from the game. Obviously, you were expecting a good defensive matchup as both teams have very good defenses. And I want to add to your point about you think the Georgia offense was overrated. I'm in the same boat as you. When we saw that offense score on every drive versus Ole Miss, you have to take into account that Ole Miss doesn't have a great defense necessarily, especially in the run game. And they would just that day they just couldn't stop a feather. But we saw not yesterday, Saturday, that Georgia is very stoppable, especially in the first half. They continue every single week to be anemic offensively in the first half, and their defense does just enough to be able to keep them in games. And I don't know if they can do that against elite teams, like you just said. I don't know if they could do that against Ohio State and Indiana or other teams like that because we've seen them struggle this year. We saw them against Bama. You can't do something like that against Bama and expect to win, even if you are at home. So looking at that game, it gives me a lot of hope for Texas going into Athens on the 15th. And then from a Florida side, offensively, they're just still what they've been. They're not that great offensively. The line continues to struggle, and DJ Lagway just continues to make the same errors that he's making every week. And honestly, is holding that offense back. I would say he's the thing because Jaden Ball is an amazing running back. He's doing what he can do. You want to put a little bit of the blame on poor play calling, like on that 4th and 1 when they went for it, when they could have gone up 6. You can't just run up the middle like that because that's what they're expecting. That's what everyone's gonna be expecting, and you're just asking for your running back to be met in the backfield and taken down. So it was pretty much what I expected. I think that Florida kind of got cheated out of the game a little bit from that deep shot, but we're not going to get too much into that. Other than that, was a good game. What do you expect from that rivalry? And just gave me more hope for Texas going into Athens.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I won't touch too much on the referee thing. I think we've kind of hashed that out enough outside of the show. But I think you said it well. Just to add some context to what I've been talking about this Georgia offense, in terms of nationally, they are 63rd in terms of passing offense. They are 42nd in total offense. They are 41st in rushing offense, and they are 42nd in terms of scoring offense. So I know that the offensive efficiency numbers look great. If you look at BCF Toys or the SP Plus or Kelly Ford, their ratings look great. And some of that is in part because of how highly rated the Ole Miss and Tennessee defenses are. And some of that is just there is preseason weight that's added to these models. Some of last year does factor into how these teams are rated. And if you watch both of those teams, Tennessee and Ole Miss, they are not very good defenses this year. Tennessee really struggles to stop explosives. They really struggle on third down. And Ole Miss linebackers do a really poor job fitting the run, and their secondary does not have great eyes. So I think that I don't want to take away too much credit from Georgia because you play against who you play. But when you've seen them against really good defenses, you haven't exactly seen a dominant offense, and you haven't seen something that indicates what these advanced analytics tell you.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there. I think that we can move on to our final game from last weekend, which was Oklahoma going into Knoxville and getting the victory. What were your initial thoughts on that game?
Yeah, so I had before the game, I told an Oklahoma fan some of my keys for them to win and for some of them to stop this Tennessee offense. And I think Venables had did some of the stuff that I thought they would. They played a lot more single high than I thought. You saw a lot of them running their three deep, two under concepts. You saw a lot of cover one in there. You did see some cover three, and you saw some three deep, three under, which are known as fire zones. So you saw a pretty diverse coverage palette from Venables in terms of what they were doing single high from two high. It was a lot of quarter half, a lot of Tampa two. So you saw them try to change the picture up on Aguilar. You saw them send a lot of pressure, which was something that I didn't necessarily think was a great idea. And I think you kind of saw that bear its fruit on Saturday, where I thought Aguilar was pretty good against pressure. I thought that in generally Tennessee was able to move the ball in Oklahoma, but Oklahoma, kind of as they do, they're a create havoc, give havoc defense. They create a lot of havoc, but they also give up a lot of explosives. And you saw that once again Saturday, where they gave up some explosives. They gave up a 40-yard completion on a screenplay. They gave up a 35-yard completion on a seam route from a tight end. They gave up almost a 40-yard run to Peyton Thomas or Peyton Lewis. um, so you saw them give up explosives, but you also saw the three takeaways. You saw the two interceptions, and you obviously saw the R. Mason Thomas scoop and score. So that's kind of what Oklahoma is defensively. They're pretty much the opposite of bend don't break. They're gonna break, but they're also gonna break you, and that's kind of how Venables has been pretty much his entire career, and that's part of what makes them so good is how aggressive they are. Offensively, I wasn't super impressed. I was impressed by their run game, but Tennessee's been pretty dreadful against the run all year, so it's hard to take too much away from that. And I still thought Mateer was okay. I saw some things on tape I wasn't super pleased with. And then for Tennessee, this was a can't lose game. I think it's fair to say that they're now completely out of the playoff hunt with three losses. And this was a game at home. Aguilar making a lot of mistakes that just shouldn't happen for a guy who's now playing in I think his ninth game of the year. So that was discouraging to see. And then defensively, the same struggles they've had all year, getting off the field on third down, stopping the run, things that you would think a top level SEC team would be able to fix, and they just haven't. So I think going into the season, you and I had something like 8-4, 9-3 on the cards for them, and that does kind of seem what they are. And that's a pretty far cry from what we thought at the end of September, where they looked like they might be one of the five best teams in the SEC.
Yeah, you touched on everything perfectly. They definitely are eliminated from playoff contention, I think, especially being ranked at 25. I don't think there are any real opportunities for them to bump their ranking up enough to get into that playoff spot. But this game, in my opinion, was the definition of stats do not tell the whole story. Because if you look at these stats, and I told you these stats pregame of what was going to happen, you would expect Tennessee to win. Joey Aguilar, 29 for 45, 393 yards, and three touchdowns. John Mateer only throwing for 159 with no touchdowns and an interception. just those two stats right there, you would think that Tennessee blew them out. You would think that it was just an absolute beating, but that just shows that stats aren't everything. When you looked at the game, Joey Aguilar, a lot of times he made a lot of costly mistakes. He made a lot of, I guess, with lack of a better term, dumb plays. He made a lot of dumb decisions. I thought Oklahoma's defense played really well. You saw in that R. Mason Thomas scoop and score where he was stiff arming a guy 20 yards downfield and kept going and was able to get in the end zone. I thought Xavier Robinson played a decent game. I thought that Oklahoma offensive line at certain points looked better than it has all season. But also, I think John Mateer, you can still kind of see that he has some fear of running in certain situations. He's still very unsure in the pocket of if he wants to take off or if he wants to throw it away, and which causes him to take a lot more sacks than he needs to. But MVP of that game, I would definitely probably give to the Oklahoma kicker. I think that he's the reason that they won that game with what Kirk said, the Daisy Dukes on. But yeah, other than that, it was kind of an ugly game, in my opinion, for the most part, especially offensively. I mean, you saw Tennessee drive a good bit, but also they just couldn't complete drives, and it was just pretty sloppy, especially in the first half.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I think that really is a good encapsulation. It was a really sloppy game, honestly, from both teams from an execution standpoint. I don't know that either team on Sunday when they were looking at the film was super pleased with what they saw. Um, so I think that's kind of what the SEC is this year, though. You see a lot of sloppy games, a lot of really poor execution from teams in moments, and it's just generally about who can win in the critical spots. Can you win on third down consistently? Can you avoid turning the ball over? Can you find ways to win? And Oklahoma did that this week, and you have to give them credit for it. They keep their playoff hopes alive, and they now have a couple of Big Ten games when they go play Missouri and Alabama, two teams that are currently ranked, and two potential playoff boosts, two potential resume boosters for OU coming up. Obviously, I think they have a bye this week, but you know who doesn't have a bye? Tulane as they play Memphis this Friday. That'll be the Group of Five game that we're talking about. This is an American Conference game. It probably is the best Group of Five conference in the country. If you look at the teams in there, that's South Florida, Memphis, Tulane. There's a lot more. It's probably the deepest Group of Five conference, and it's probably going to be the conference that tells you who the Group of Five representative will be in the playoff. Clint, do you have any thoughts on Tulane, Memphis? Any early feels on that one?
Yeah, so you said it perfectly right there when you said that they are the deepest group of five conference. I mean, if you look at the top five teams in those standings, all these teams arguably could get that group of five playoff spot. You have South Florida, who's been one of the leaders all year. You have Tulane, who they have a very solid team, only have one conference loss. You have North Texas, who for a while looked like the leader for that spot too, along with USF. Memphis right now, who at this point would be the group of five team in the playoffs. And then even Navy, who only has one conference loss and will be taking on Memphis and Tulane or not Tulane, South Florida at one point. So it's still a very wide open conference, and this game will determine a lot in the future of who will get that group of five spot. I think for this game, though, the key for me is just going to be it being at Memphis. I think Silverfield's a pretty good coach. I think that they have a really decent team. Even though Arkansas isn't one of the best teams in the SEC and they're down to the bottom of it, it's still as a group of five playing up and being able to beat a Power Five, especially SEC team, is impressive. I thought that last week, or I think it was last week or the week before, or 2 weeks ago, when they played South Florida, I thought that they played a really good game that day. I thought that they were able to stay in the game. I'd like the fight that they had, and I think for this game I'm going to take Memphis. I think with Tulane, especially from last week, what we saw against UTSA in the Alamo Dome, where they got obliterated 48-26. That defense just couldn't get a single stop and looked very porous. And Jake Retzlaff looked very rattled. I don't know if the John Summerall talk is having any distraction on that team. I doubt it, but either way, from what I saw last week and from what I've seen Memphis recently, I think Memphis has a lot of momentum going into this game, and I think that they're going to carry on with it. I think Memphis will win. I'm going to say about a 37-24 game. I just have a lot of confidence in that team in Silverfield.
Yeah, I don't think that's an unfair opinion to have. I think Memphis has played some really good ball recently. They obviously beat USF. They've beaten some other teams. They've done a really good job this year. They beat Arkansas, an SEC team who has given a lot of other really good SEC teams a lot of problems. We've seen them take A&M all the way to the brink. So that's a good team in Memphis. They've beat some really good teams. On the other side for Tulane, they've got one of the best coaches in the country, and John Sumrall. He'll probably be in the SEC next year, whether that's at Auburn or whether that's at Arkansas, whether that's at Kentucky, whether that's LSU. We'll see. But they've got a really good coach. They consistently get really good defensive performances. They do a good job offensively. They even after they lost Darian Mensah to Duke, they've been pretty potent offensively. So it's a big test for Memphis. But I agree with you. I think that just as these things go, when you have a coach who is in these big time program searches, I think it can be a distraction. I think it can be an external factor. And I don't think Memphis is dealing with that right now. Memphis is playing really good football. They're super hot right now. So I'll agree with you there, and I'll take Memphis to win.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there. I think we're ready to move on to the next game, which in a lot of people's eyes, especially ESPN's eyes, with them going to College Game Day in Lubbock, we'll be having the now number 7 ranked BYU Cougars going to the number 8 Texas Tech Red Raiders. BYU coming on a still undefeated season, with Texas Tech having the lone loss in Tempe, Arizona earlier this season. What would your initial thoughts be on this game?
Yeah. So the first thing I had to look up was if Morton, the Texas Tech quarterback, was healthy because obviously the backup, Will Hammond, had torn his ACL. I think either this last week or the week before. And so you wondered what it would look like in terms of quarterback play for Texas Tech against Kansas State. It started off really slow. Eventually, it picked up. I think they hadn't scored more than 14 up until about a couple minutes before halftime against Kansas State. That was a really slow start for Tech, and then they eventually turned it on. So it does give you a little bit of nerves heading into this game against BYU, who has a really good young quarterback in Barrett Bachmeyer. He's a really good passer. He's mobile. He's athletic. He's kind of everything that a modern quarterback is these days in college football. So for me, that was kind of the first thing I wanted to know is Tech going to be healthy at quarterback? Because on the other side, I think it's going to be really interesting because Texas Tech's got maybe the best defensive line in the entire country. Talking about Lee Hunter, David Bailey, Romello Heights. It's a really good defensive line, and it's one that can create a lot of havoc for BYU. But they also play a lot of base, so you don't see them play a lot of nickel. So they do tend to lack a little team speed. And when you lack team speed, I think teams can give you some problems, especially on things like swing screens, on getting the ball to the perimeter. And so to me, I wonder if that's something that BYU is going to do if they're going to try to attack outside. If they can, I like BYU's ability to create some explosives. But to me, I think it just comes down to which defense do you trust to help their offense more. And that's fairly simple to me. I think it's Texas Tech. There's an argument that they have a top 5 defense in the entire country. So I'll take Texas Tech here. It being at home also matters a lot here to me. So I'll take Tech.
Yeah, I'm going with the same direction as you. I'm going to go Tech with this game. One of the big points that I go to is what you just stated now is that they have the top 5 defense in the country. A big reason why they were able to get out of Manhattan unscathed Saturday was because they created 5 turnovers. I'm pretty sure that was the number. It was either 4 or 5, but they were able to make plays on defense to help what lackluster offense they were seeing for that entire first half. You obviously saw it pick up in the second half when they were able to rattle off a couple touchdowns and get up to 43 points. But Will Hammond being out for the season has made me a little bit more eerie on picking them. just because I think that he in general is a better quarterback than Morton is, even when Morton's healthy. But I still have a lot of faith in that Tech team. I think that it being in Lubbock, even though it's not at night, which would a night game in Lubbock is one of the most underrated environments in the country. I think that Tech will win. I think they're going to be fired up for that game. I think BYU. I don't see any team being undefeated in the Big 12 this year. I just can't see it. I think that Tech will come out firing. I think that they know that if they lose this game, they're most likely out of the playoffs with them having 2 conference losses. But I think I'm going to lean on that defense. I think that, like you said, their D line's amazing. David Bailey, arguably the best defensive lineman in the country. You could. Running back game hasn't been too bad. The receivers have started to pick up a lot more, and I think that BYU will. I think BYU will have trouble offensively, and I honestly think it'll be about a 2-score win for Tech. I'm going to go somewhere around 34 to 24. I just really like this Tech team, and I think that they will continue their playoff march.
Yeah, just one last point on this. I was talking about the Texas Tech offense and its struggles. So their drives against Kansas State in the first half was an interception, a punt, a turnover on downs that went 17 yards, another punt, a field goal that was a 79-play drive, a touchdown that was 19 yards off of a fumble that their defense created, a field goal that was based off a drive that was 17 yards, a touchdown that was 49 yards based off of a fumble. They also had a scoop and score, and then they had another touchdown that was 24 yards. So when you go look at their drive chart, it's not a whole lot of offensive success. It's really their defense creating a lot of turnovers for them and giving them the ball in really good spots. And so that'll be something to watch for this weekend is, can Texas Tech turn over BYU? Because if they can't, then they're gonna be in some real trouble, because this is not an offense that has had a lot of success recently. It's not an offense that you really feel comfortable can consistently create success against a good defense like BYU is. And BYU and Barry Bachmeier has not turned the ball over a lot. He's only had 3 interceptions all year long. And so I think that is something to watch for. Now, he hasn't seen Texas Tech's defensive line. He hasn't seen their secondary before. So that's obviously something to take into consideration there. And that's partially why I'm going to pick Texas Tech, and why I think you pick Texas Tech is just there's a scale factor here, and just that Texas Tech is a lot better than everyone that BYU has played so far.
Yeah, I think you said all that perfectly. I think for the next game, we are going to go into Texas A&M versus Missouri and Columbia. I'll actually be at this game this weekend, so it'll be fun to see this game in person, fun to go to Fairfield Field for the first time. What would your initial thoughts be with Mizzou having the third-string quarterback, because I don't think Sam Horn's back, and then just A&M's ability to continue being undefeated?
Yeah, so I think this is a really good test for Texas A&M, because I'll be blunt, I don't think they've done a great job defensively in the run game. Every time I watch them, I feel like their linebackers, despite the love that Torian York gets, consistently misfit gaps. I don't think they do a great job in terms of being fundamentally sound and being gap sound. And you saw this against Florida. You saw this 2 weeks ago against LSU in the first half, where LSU was averaging something like 7 yards a carry. And LSU is not a good running offense. They have struggled all year, but they had a lot of success against A&M. And I don't think that was just a coincidence. I think that is just a general thing that happens when you play A&M. And so this is arguably the best SEC rushing attack in Missouri. So A&M is going to have their hands full. I think that this will once again be another litmus test for this Texas A&M defense. I thought that they'd passed with flying colors against Florida, and then they failed drastically against Arkansas, and they failed miserably against LSU, especially in terms of the run defense. So you have questions about this team, and I think you're going to get a little bit more of them answered with Missouri, especially in the run game. I'm personally a believer in Matt Zollers. I think he's more talented than Bo Prabula, and I think he's more talented than Sam Horn. So I don't necessarily think it's a terrible. I don't think that it's a terrible disadvantage for them having a third string quarterback who is mobile and who has real arm talent. So I think it can help out Missouri in that way. I think they're going to have a little bit more explosiveness in the pass game, and then for A&M, it's a really good test for their tackles because Damon Wilson and Zion Young are a really good pass rush duo. They're really good at the edge spots. They know how to get home quick. So I think this is a really good test for A&M. I'll take A&M to win just because I think they're more talented. I think they'll be able to generate explosives with Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion. But I do think this could be a close game, and I would not be surprised at all if at the end of Saturday, Texas A&M has a 1 in their loss chart.
Yeah, I was going to really. I was actually going to say something about that because I think this could be a really big letdown spot for A&M. I think a lot of people see a third string quarterback from Missouri and they kind of look past this game. Matt Zollers did not play bad against Vanderbilt when he went in. I think he played pretty decent, especially for the situation he was put into. And I mean, you almost saw them go to overtime. They caught a Hail Mary on the half-yard line, so he didn't play bad at all. He didn't really hold them back too much. And to your point with the rushing attack, Ahmad Hardy's one of the best in the nation that we've seen. They have the 10th best rushing attack, averaging 235.5 yards a game. While the Texas A&M rush defense ranks, it does rank a little bit higher, but also, like you said earlier, you have a situation where they have an effect to where they make a lot of teams feel like they have to play from behind, to where they have to really air the ball out a lot more than they need to. So the numbers I feel are a little bit skewed there, but I have a lot of faith in Missouri. I think that they have a really good defense too. If you look at just the rankings of what they are defensively in the nation. 242.3 yards per game allowed. They're fifth in the nation for that. Their passing defense is seventh in the nation with 155.4 passing yards allowed. So I think that it could be a big test for Marcel Reed also. I think with the rushing attack, 86.9 yards per game allowed, which is 11th. And then scoring, they only give up 16.8 points per game. So I think that this game could really end up being an upset and a game that you really look forward to see if A&M can still continue what they're doing, if they can still continue to get the wins on the road, because we've seen historically, except for the week before in Death Valley, you see them really struggle on the road. You see them being tight games, like against Arkansas, 45-42, against Notre Dame, they only win by 1. So it's going to be a big test for them. I think, honestly, I want to pick A&M, but also I think that this will be an upset. In all honesty, I'm going to take Missouri right here. I'm going to take them very late. I think eventually A&M is going to slip up, and I honestly think it will be before Texas. So I'm going to take Missouri to win this game, but I'm not very confident in it.
Yeah, I don't think it's unfair to take Missouri to win. I think the line is something like A&M minus 3.5. To me,
It's
that's
minus 6.5.
yeah. I would not. I would pretty comfortably take the Missouri cover there, unless Vegas knows something I don't. I feel it's not. The two teams are very comparable, so I'm with you. I think it'll be a really close game, and I think it could go either way. Just a quick touch on a comment by Milan. The Texas front seven is elite. I think they cause problems for a shaky Georgia O line. Clint and I aren't going to talk about Texas, Georgia this week. We will do an entire episode next week. We'll spend the entire hour breaking that game down. We'll have some tape of all 4 units. I'll talk a little bit about both defenses. Clint will talk about both offenses. We'll give you guys a full recap, a full idea of how that game is going to go and what to expect before giving you guys our predictions. But I don't necessarily think you're wrong. I think that Georgia's offensive line, I don't know if I would call it shaky. I think they've done a good job since that Tennessee game of stabilizing themselves. They're a lot healthier now. I think that they're developing a lot more and they're doing a better job there. But I will say, I do think both of their tackles are a bit susceptible to power. If you look at one of the sacks that Gunnar Stockton took, Monroe Fleeling, the left tackle, gets just boxed into Gunnar Stockton by Tyreek Sapp. And so that tells you that there may be a little bit of anchor issues there, and that's something that Texas can look for. And then I think obviously with Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, Ty Anthony Smith, Liana Lafau, I think you do feel confident that you can get pressure against Georgia if you can get them into third and long. And that would be something that, without going too much into detail, something that I would think would be key to that game. But I've already said too much about the game. We're going to move on to the last and final game that we're predicting, and I'll let Clint start us off.
Oregon, Iowa, right?
Yep.
Okay. So for this game, I think it could also be a possible upset watch right here. Iowa, they're kind of the typical team that you see every year from them. Very good defense, very solid. They do really good at stopping even the best offenses, but their offense isn't necessarily one of the best in the nation. I think it's better this year than it's been in recent years with Mark Gronowski at the helm. I think he's elevated it a little bit. I wouldn't say too much because they're not really a pass first team. They really like to run the ball. From what you've seen this year, they kind of have a running back by committee room with Kamari Moulton. You see Xavier Williams get some touches, Jazion Patterson, and then Mark Gronowski likes to run the rock a lot. So they're a very run heavy team and not a team that's really going to beat you in the air, but they're a team that can hold you to very little points to where that offensive and that offense being anemic won't hurt them too much. But with Oregon, I think they're a very solid team. I think offensively, they've been pretty good all year. You saw them last week, though, struggle a lot with Wisconsin, who has been a pitiful team all year. They're 2-6, and I'm not sure that they have a conference win. I could be completely wrong.
No.
But,
No, they don't.
Okay. So, yeah, a Wisconsin team that's been horrible all year. They really struggled, only winning 21-7. That could just be a one-game thing, but also I don't know if that's telling of something of like a trend that they're going on. I think that Iowa, especially, it's a 2:30 game. You see a lot of weird stuff happen in Iowa year after year. You go back to 2017, you have that Ohio State upset. You go back to 2021, they beat a top 3 Penn State team. And then just over the other years, you've seen constant things happen in Kinnick Stadium to where it's just one of those environments that's kind of like Jordan Hare to where they just have some magic in that stadium a lot of times. So the spread's at 6.5. I think that Oregon's obviously the better team. But I think with the line being so low, I think there's something Vegas knows that I don't know. I'm not going to act like I'm some expert on Iowa when I haven't watched too much of them this year, to be completely honest. But I think that Iowa has the ability to pull off the upset, and I think they will. I'm going to go with a 27-23 win with Iowa. I think that they're going to show out that day, and I think it's just going to be one of those days in Kinnick Stadium.
Yeah, I think I don't think you're wrong. I think Iowa could give Oregon a lot of problems just in terms of I think they can drag Oregon into deep water. And what I mean by that is I think Iowa has the ability to really slow this game down. And I think it starts with their defense. It's pretty much every year with Philip Parker, you can expect top 10 defenses. It's just what they do. They're always super good defensively. Now, a lot of that comes from the fact that they play a lot of cover two and they'll disguise a lot. They're very much like what you'd expect from an NFL defense, where for Texas fans, if you remember what it looked like against Ohio State, or they would show one safety in the middle of the field and they would rotate to two safeties, or they would show two safeties and then rotate to one, or they would rotate two safeties and then it would be a safety in a corner, and they were rolling a backside safety down. They do a lot of disguising. They do a lot of different things to try to confuse quarterbacks. And the last time that we saw Dante Moore against one of these defenses, he threw 2 interceptions and he didn't look very comfortable against Indiana. So I do think there is some cause for concern here for Oregon, where I think this game could get really ugly. I think it could be low scoring, and it could be one of those games where you look up in the fourth quarter and it's 13-10 and you don't know which way it's going to go. For me, I just think I trust Oregon's offense to find enough points, where Iowa is really, really bad offensively, and this is a good Oregon defense. I don't trust Iowa to be able to score even 17 points. And because I don't trust them to score 17 points, I can't pick them to win. So I'll take Oregon to win. I'll take them to win a pretty close game, something like 20-10. But I don't think I'd be surprised if on Saturday we do see Iowa win.
Yeah, I think you covered that game perfectly. I don't really have too much to add to that.
Yeah, and so I guess my last comment, just to wrap up the show, is We saw this last year when there's weeks without a lot of ranked games, or there's weeks that we think are going to be quote unquote sleeper weeks. We tend to see a lot of upsets. If you remember last year, there was a week that Tennessee lost to Arkansas. This was the week that Alabama lost to OU. There was a couple of other
Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt, sorry. There was a lot of these games where it felt like there wasn't a whole lot of ranked matchups. There wasn't a whole lot of things to be excited about. And all of a sudden, college football delivered. I would just say be wary of that this week. I think you could see some really big upsets.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, when you were talking about the Alabama Oklahoma week, that same week we saw A&M go into Jordan Hare and get upset in quadruple overtime. And they're just those weeks where it's just funny that on all those weeks where you don't have a lot of those ranked matchups, it looks like a week that's going to be very much of a sleeper week, very much a, I guess, boring week, which I don't think any weeks are boring in college football, but in the general scheme of how most of the season is, it can be a boring week. You end up seeing the most chaos happen. And those end up being some of the most fun weeks of the season. So I think you really look out for a couple of those games this week. I think there are a lot of games that have the potential to be upsets. I would even say a couple more games have potential to be upset, like I guess Georgia, Mississippi State. Obviously, I don't want that to happen, but I think that could happen. But that's why you're seeing a lot of these low lines with ranked versus unranked matchups.
Yeah. Vegas tends to know things. They don't just put out lines for the sake of it. They tend to be really well informed. So when you see a line like some of the ones we're seeing, that kind of keys you in on something. That's going to be, unless Clint, you have anything else to add, we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks for joining us. It's been a little bit of a shorter stream today. I say that while we've gone 51 or something like minutes, but next week we'll be here for a while. We're going to be talking the entire Georgia Texas game. We'll go through all four phases of the game that matter. Talking Texas offense, Texas defense, Georgia offense, Georgia defense. We'll let you in on where each team will attack the other, what they'll do to try to exploit matchups, what you can expect in terms of coordinator battles, what you can expect in terms of player matchups, and then we'll give you a prediction at the end of the show. But we'll have a really, really packed show for you guys next week. So please be there. And we would really appreciate you guys subscribing, commenting, retweeting, follow the X page, follow the YouTube page. Do whatever you can to stay locked into Total Coverage. And we'll see you next time.